Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the sales coaching webinar hosted by Stuckey and Company. Looks like there's a few people still logging on, but to be respectful of everybody's time, let's go ahead and get started. So in 2016, our carriers have joined us so far to present on some great topics in a few general categories. General insurance, things like how to calculate the NCCI mod of a work comp policy, claims specific webinars, the importance of getting back to work and whatnot, and product differentiators, needle stick and claims network, and really just the passion of the carriers in the business. And it's been real interesting to see the outcome of each of the webinars and how highly training has been received. We've been working hard to get some of our webinars approved for CE credits and generate some invitations to industry certification classes. We've seen a lot of support from our carriers on doing some of those things. One of the most requested topics has been around the topic of sales. We've hosted social media lead generation training webinars, and in the coming months, we're going to plan on hosting some SEO and paid search training camps presented by an ad agency and their partner Google. So stay tuned for that. A few things before we get started. If you want to ask any questions, there's the questions tab in the GoToWebinar control panel on the right of your screen. Just type any questions there. We will have a question and answer session after the webinar if we have time. And also, we will have a follow-up email coming out to you with a link to the recording of the webinar, the PowerPoint presentation as a PDF, and some pretty cool bonus material just for attending. Again, if we don't get to all of your questions, we will get to all of your questions by email or phone. So we'll definitely get to it within the next day or two to answer any of your questions. So Stuckey and Company has been in the business for 25 years. We have 9 specialty insurance programs, and they range everywhere from a general, commercial lines business to very specific professional liability programs, as you'll see. And we have a lot of satisfied customers over those 25 years. As a MGA or a specialty program manager, we kind of do it all. We create the program and the underwriting guides, we write it up, quote it, bind it, issue it, endorse them, invoice them. We have reporting with the carriers. We integrate our systems with the agents and the carriers as well, handle the claims on some of our programs, and do marketing and training. So if you have any need for any of those services on a general insurance basis or for a program, let us know. These are our specialty programs. Again, they range from a technology E&O specific insurance program all the way to some of the general classes of business like personal lines, commercial, and surplus lines. So next, I'd like to thank David Schwendiman, sales coach, speaker, and trainer, for presenting and making himself available for questions after the webinar. David works exclusively with salespeople and their teams, helping them achieve incredible results. And that's really how we aligned today. We want to bring those results into your agency. So I'd like to turn it over to David now.
Perfect. I'm ready to go.
There you go.
All right. So can you guys hear me okay?
I can, yes, loud and clear.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, I wanted to give everybody on the call just a brief background. I'm not going to make this webinar all about me. I'd rather talk about making you all money, but I think it does help to kind of know where I'm coming from in this whole thing. I'm probably the last guy that should honestly be on a sales training webinar. Back in 2010, I was a contractor in the process of losing my business. I went dead broke due to poor business management on my end. And at that time, I had only been an entrepreneur, had 3 other failed businesses behind me, and it turned out in that economy with that kind of resume, there weren't many options. And so I answered Craigslist ad looking for new insurance agents for Farmers Insurance. They were looking for some new rookie agents. Answered the ad. They offered me an interview. It was the first one I'd ever been offered after this big crash, and I had 0 sales background, no idea what I was doing, but we were literally eating bean burritos for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, trying to scrape by. So I went in, and that's how I started my insurance career. My first 2 months in the business, I made literally no money. I think actually, you know what, I made $100, and a lady wandered in to my district office one day. My district manager wrote her a policy, put my producer code on it, and I got a $100 commission off that one. So not a great start for me in terms of sales, and specifically in insurance. I thought I was about to fail at my 4th business. But I had the opportunity to sit down with a guy who sold commercial insurance exclusively, just the products that Dwight and I connected about, you know, the professional liability and commercial products, and took this guy out for a cup of coffee and picked his brain, just said, listen, I am not doing well in this business. I need to turn this around. And that was kind of the beginning. My interview with him, from there I went on to interview a number of the top producing agents inside and outside of Farmers Insurance, the President's Council agents, the agents that were making MDRT for life insurance, and really just started taking notes and making a study of sales from these guys, started applying what I learned. 5 months later, I was the rookie agent, top producing rookie agent in the state for commercial insurance, doing some big franchises. I was working with Denny's, McDonald's, Subway, a lot of other independent small businesses I was working with. From restaurants were my favorite, but also auto mechanics and professional liability lawyers, doctors, that kind of stuff. So went on to be recruited by corporate to come and do trainings. I trained salespeople. I trained 180 insurance agents within Farmers across Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. And during the 1.5 years I did that, those 180 agents outperformed the other 13,000 in the company in terms of growth over baseline. So we saw huge production out of these agents using exactly what we're about to talk about today. And back in 2014, I parted ways with the company because I really wanted to take what was working for me, what was working for my agents, and bring it out on a broader base to a lot of independent agents. I felt like there was an opportunity outside of corporate for a lot of people who could do a lot better and make a lot more money, specifically in the commercial side of things with insurance. So that's what today's about. Today's about the tools that I used as an agent, the tools that I now use with my one-on-one clients. Just some brief results on those. I have an agent here in town. I live in Bend, Oregon, and not a huge town here. And when I got together with Karen, one of my clients, she was making about $8,000 a month was her take-home, which she'd been in business for 10 years. She should have been making more, and she had some big goals. You know, we started working together, again, using the things we're going to talk about. 5 months later, she was bringing home over $19,000 a month. So Dwight asked me to come present. I took all my best stuff, and over the next 60 minutes or less, I'm going to give you guys everything I have, and if you take this, it should be field ready at this point. This is stuff I use day in and day out with my clients, and it gets them a lot of commercial accounts. So that's the part on me. Let's dig into material here. The first thing I want to talk about is, and that I often work with on my clients, is the mindset around selling, and specifically the mindset around this business-to-business professional liability anytime we're working with a business owner. Same thing applies to your P&C, but there's just a lot of opportunity, and this is really effective when we apply it to our commercial accounts. And anyone who's familiar with Groundhog's Day probably recognizes Bill Murray on the left there, and Ned the Bull, the life insurance salesman, accosting him on the right-hand side. And I love this picture because this really shows how I started in the business. When I first got into sales, like I said, I had no background in selling. The training I was given was pretty minimal. It was all around cold calling and just pushing, just that call over and over and over again until eventually you can wear your prospect down into giving you the chance at their business. And honestly, I felt like crap selling that way. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't want to go out and market. I didn't want to make the phone calls because I didn't like the person that I was being when I would do that. And my customers felt the same way. The results I was getting spoke that. I would try and walk into 10 businesses a week and got 0 results. Like I said, those first 2 months while I'm doing this, just nothing. Actually was escorted out of a business at one point. I did such a poor job, the owner stopped me mid-sentence and told me I was time to leave and physically walked me out of her shop there. So totally embarrassing. I wasn't getting any results. And like I said, when I started interviewing some of these top producing agents and asking them what they did that was so different than me, the first thing that I found was their mindset was different. And specifically, when I was calling or when I was going door to door and I'm walking into businesses, my mindset was all around me, my commission, and my absolute need to make money. And when I brought that with me, there's no bigger turnoff, I figured out, for a business owner or for anybody that I'm approaching than my neediness and my focus on me. It's also, unfortunately, what most other salespeople are bringing into that organization when they call or when they prospect. So the biggest change, and if you walk away with nothing else from this, like I said, this is the one place that I start with all of my clients, is what is your mindset when you're prospecting or when you're selling? And if your mindset is on yourself and your need to write the policy or you're being excited about getting a commission, the customers can read that and they can feel it, and it just repels them like crazy. So I had to shift my approach. I had to shift what I was thinking about when I was going in, to the point where, and my district manager thought I was absolutely nuts for doing this when I first started, but I started approaching every prospect, every commercial prospect, every life insurance sale, every P&C sale, whatever it was, everything was about serving my customer. They weren't even my customer yet, but serving that person. What could I do to make their life easier? What could I do to make things better on their end? And that might mean that I call somebody and they say they're not interested right now, but I learned something about it. Maybe I learned a place that they're struggling, or like I said, they're in restaurants. I might have some ideas that I would use with a lot of my restaurants who did catering on how they could land more catering clients. And so I'd send them an article on that, or I'd find some way to help this person make more money in their business, even if they never worked with me. And just that approach number one, made me feel a lot better. I knew that whoever I talked to all day long, I was doing good. I was making a difference in someone's life, and I was helping, which is hopefully why we're in this business to begin with. And the other thing that shifted there was my customers started responding differently to me. And I first noticed this when I met with an electrician. I was early on in my career. This was my first big sale that I ever had. I had cold called a guy, an electrician. He offered to sit down with me over lunch. He shows up to our lunch meeting, and he's about 10 minutes late to the meeting. He comes running into the restaurant, sits down. I have my paperwork all ready. I got my quote sheet ready. I'm ready to get this dialed in. And he says to me, "Listen, I don't like salespeople, and I don't have time for this. I need to get back to the job." And I knew right then I probably was not going to land this client. So I just said, well, since my sales shot, I'm just going to enjoy lunch and I guess just talk to this guy. So we just started talking about his business. Why was he an electrician? How long had he been in business? What was he struggling with right now in his business? And that conversation turned into 3.5 hours of us chatting over lunch. He bought my lunch, took me on a tour of the shop, and when I walked away from that meeting, the guy literally patted me on the back and said, "I'm going to go with you, just put some numbers together." And that day I closed my largest commercial policy I'd ever closed at that point. And I realized what had happened was he was coming in bracing for a standard sales pitch, a standard sales presentation. But my mindset, when I realized that's what he wanted, I knew I had no shot if I was going to approach it that way. So dropped everything and just connected with him on his level. I got super curious about his business, learned everything I could about him, and just the fact that I listened at that level and shared ideas and shared in what I was working on to both get and retain customers. We had a great talk about his business. That's what won the guy over. That's what ended up having him go with me. So mindset. If we can change anything in this business, my goal with my clients, my goal on a bigger scale is to stop this image of salespeople as being only interested in themselves and going after their own stuff, and shifting it to that of serving that prospect or serving that client. Because if we do that, that's really what makes the sale right there. So number one, your mindset. If you have the right mindset, have it be about them, the sale is not only going to go smoother, you're going to make a ton more of them. So that being said, there's still some hoops that we have to jump through and some technical stuff I can help you with that I also work on with my clients. And that, number one, is around gatekeepers. So anybody on this call who's ever tried to walk into a business, or if you're cold calling businesses, whether it's straight out of the phone book or using your Info USA lead, whoever you're calling, we generally hit a gatekeeper first off. And this is the second place that a lot of people, myself included, make mistakes early on, is we look at this gatekeeper as somebody to get around. We look at this gatekeeper as the person who's in between me, the salesperson, and the owner or the decision maker who is gonna give me the yes or no on making the sale. And therefore, my goal was to get through the gatekeeper as fast as possible and into the person who can actually help me out. But again, this is a big mistake. And when I have a client right now who works in shipping, just doing business-to-business cold calls 8 hours a day, all day long. He's talking to gatekeepers all day long. And his approach was to try to just get past them, to get to the person who could give him an answer and write him a check. And he was struggling. He was struggling to make money. And after using this tool we're about to talk about, the guy made 6 times more money this last year than he's ever made before. And what we did was we shifted his approach to these gatekeepers from trying to get through them or trying to get around them to a decision maker to actually working with the gatekeeper, to whoever that person is, that admin assistant who's stopping you from getting in front of the doctor or the lawyer, that person who's working the front desk, who's not going to tell you when the owner's in for the restaurant. You know, these people, if I treat them as my advocates, if I treat them as somebody who's an ally with me to help me get this account, I found personally, and my clients also find, that all of a sudden we're getting through the door a lot faster where everyone else is getting turned away. So that's the first piece, is we've got to shift the mindset around these gatekeepers. Their job is to stop people like us from getting through, because the last guy they let through did a terrible job. The last guy they let through kept the manager or the owner on the phone for 30 minutes or 40 minutes or 60 minutes, however long they could keep them there, talking at them about their sale. And I'll tell you, the gatekeeper is the one that got in trouble for that afterwards. So we have to know that they're very, very cautious of us when we call in. So anytime I make a phone call to a business these days, and somebody answers the phone who's not just the owner picking up right away, I have to know that this person is going to be very cautious of giving me any information I could use to move further into that account, because they're the ones who are going to get in trouble if I do a bad job and I upset the owner. They're going to get in trouble for letting me through. So we want to really, we've got to get this person on our side. And if this person is on our side and believes we're there to help, and that it will be a good experience for the owner to let us through, we are much more likely to actually have a conversation with the person we're trying to get a hold of. So now, how to do that? So Dwight mentioned we'll be sending you some emails after this call. I'm going to include every script that you see on here and anything else I think might be helpful for all of you. It's all going to be in that follow-up email. So you will be getting these. Just go ahead and get a feel for what these are like here on the webinar today, so you can get a feel for if this will work for you moving forward. Now, this script that I use, this is one of my favorite ones. This is my initial contact script. So if I'm talking to somebody and I have a gatekeeper that picks up the phone, which is most likely going to. So as soon as someone picks up, I want to introduce myself, good afternoon, and let's say, for instance, that Dwight answers the phone wherever I'm calling. Good afternoon, Dwight. This is Dave Schwendiman calling with Farmers Insurance. I have no idea if you're the right person to talk to or if I can even help. I might be able to or not. I'm just not sure. I'm calling about the profit and liability protection of the business. Do you know who would handle that? Okay, so right there, what I'm doing is I'm just trying to get a feel for who this person is. I don't know if they're the owner yet, so that's why I'm asking that question. I have no idea if you're the right person that can, who I should be talking to. I'm also, that second line there, or if I can help, I might be able to or I might not. That really takes the pressure off. That takes this from being a sales call where I'm calling to pitch something or try and get something, and now I'm shifting it to, I'm just going to have a conversation with you, and you can let me know if this is going to work or not. So I'm calling about the profit and liability protection of the business. Do you know who would handle that? Okay, this is very gentle. I'm asking for help, especially that last question. Do you know who would handle that? So I'm letting them know I don't know who the right person to talk to is, and I'm basically putting myself at their feet and saying, would you please help me? Now, I'm calling in cold. I realize this is a cold call. I don't know who the person is that I need to be talking to. Could you help me with that? When I ask for help from somebody, this gatekeeper, rather than, again, either assuming I know who to talk to and trying to get around them, or trying to just plow through and bully them into giving me the information, I'm much more likely to start building an advocate on my side and have somebody who feels okay telling me who's in charge. So let's say that Greg is in charge, and they tell me that, Greg's the guy that would handle our liability protection. I want to say, okay, great. Is Greg available now, or should I call back another time? I don't want to interrupt their day. Okay, again, now if I'm walking in person or if I'm on the phone, this next line is so critical because, like I said before, the last salesperson that called in, who they did let through, that person took up all of Greg's time. And I can't tell you how often I have prospects when I was doing commercial sales who would buy from me simply because I kept my word. And if I told them my presentation would take 10 minutes, I would keep it to 10 minutes. And that's such a big deal in this business. And a big piece of advice I got early on was, if you respect the time of your prospect will then respect you. So with this gatekeeper, I need to put him at ease right away. If I'm going to have any chance at getting through to the next level, I've got to make them feel okay with sharing this with me. So that's why I'm asking, is this a good time or should I call back later? I don't want to interrupt their day. That lets them know that my agenda is not about me. It's not about just me making my sale. It's about, I'm respectful of their time. I'm respectful of their boss's time. And if it's not a good time now, it doesn't matter how hard I push. I'm just going to be sent to voicemail or told no over and over again until eventually the call ends. So by doing it this way, I find out now who I should be talking to, and I find out a good time to get a hold of that person when I won't be bugging them. So some advice I got early on when I was calling around to restaurants was the best time is to call early in the morning when the owner is there. And yes, it was true. The owner was there early in the mornings. That was a terrible time to call on restaurants because the owner was there trying to get set up for the day. And after making some of these phone calls and talking to that front desk person, I learned that, and I learned the best time to get a hold of people was actually right after the lunch rush. So by using that, I could find out exactly when my prospect would be in and when they wouldn't be super busy, meaning my chances of having a positive outcome to that phone call go way up. Now, if they tell me I need to call back later, I just move on to the next line, which is perfect. I'll try back then. Tell me, will you be the one who answers most likely when I call back? Again, I'm making this person an advocate. I'm making this person an ally of me. If Dwight's the one that picked up the first time and he's going to be the one that answers when I call back, well, there's going to be some name recognition there. I can have some rapport already built with him. And so I want to make sure I ask that, and that way I know when I call back, I have a little note down on this lead that Dwight's most likely to answer the phone and that we've talked before. So when I call back and Dwight picks up, it can be, hey, this is Dave, and we'll go into that script in a minute, but it really, really helps in terms of my callback. Now I'm a familiar voice. I'm not just that stranger, that salesperson calling in who they've never heard from before. So in terms of a script, this initial contact script, and again, this works. I would use this when I was walking into businesses as well. So if anyone out there is doing any door-to-door commercial, which is not terribly efficient, but it can be really effective, I would use the same one, walking in, whoever was the first person I ran into, same kind of a deal. I have no idea if you're the one to talk to. I've got some ideas I think might be able to help the owner, or they could be terrible ideas. I'm just not sure. Who would be responsible for the profit and liability protection of the business? And then I go through the same thing. I only want 60 seconds of their time. Would now be good, or should I come back later? I don't want to interrupt their day. And so this script works whether you're in person or whether you're over the phone. Really good one, especially if you've got a contact manager or somebody calling on your behalf. Most of my large accounts were done and lined up by my contact manager who used this exact script and got me into a number of businesses because it's so disarming to have somebody call and speak this way. So that's our initial contact. That's when I first reach out to somebody. After that, let me see if I can move forward here. Oh, there we go. So this is my follow-up, and Dwight, I'm going to pause for just a minute because I've lost my mouse here. So I'm going to get my mouse back on track, and then I'll be back. There we go. Okay, so my follow-up. So after I've made that initial contact, now I'm going to be calling back at the time when they told me it was a good time to reach back out to them, right? So I've made my initial contact. They told me that Greg, the owner, let's say he's in on Thursdays, afternoons around 1 p.m. are usually the best time to get a hold of him. So call back up, same basic intro, okay? Say good afternoon, good morning, whatever time of day I'm calling. Hey, Dwight, this is Dave Schwendiman with Farmers. I called in a few days ago about the profit and loss. You said this would be a good time to get in touch with Greg. Now, at that point, I just want to pause and just wait. If I do any more talking, I'm more likely to talk myself into a corner rather than actually get myself moved forward. So what I've done here is I've reestablished the connection we had before. So there's the familiarity is back there again. And at that point, I wait and let the gatekeeper tell me if this was a good time. So they're the one initially that said, when you should call in. I'm referencing that. And if it's still this isn't a good day, chances are I'll get put right through. That's what most often happens with me. If it's a good day, they say, oh, I remember you, absolutely. You know what? He's in the back. Let me put you through. So now I'm getting a nice warm transfer through to the person I want to talk to. If not, they're going to tell me, and I just go back to that initial script. Oh, absolutely, I understand things can get crazy. Tell me, is this still a good time? Should I try back at this time tomorrow? Or is there another time maybe that's better than this? Because again, I don't want to interrupt this day when I call. So I want to reconfirm this is the right time, it was a fluke, or if not, then I just find a better time to call back. Commercial calling, in my experience, to be successful at it does not take a long time, but it does take a number of follow-ups to get through. So I'll do this follow-up as often as I need to get through to that account if it's an account that I really want to write. So when I was chasing down a guy who owned a number of Denny's restaurants and Best Western hotels in my area, it took me about 6 weeks of calling every other day. It took me about 2 minutes per phone call. He used this exact script, but eventually we did find a time when the owner was in, and because I've been so respectful of him, he invited me to breakfast. We sat down, we talked for about an hour and a half about his business, and I got a very large commercial account out of that. So I don't mind doing these kind of follow-ups if it's going to get me through, okay, rather than just trying to plow ahead and getting the door closed in my face. So again, as the gatekeeper tells me if it works or not, and then I remind them that I only need about 60 seconds of the decision maker's time to see if what I have to offer would be of interest. Okay, again, this is taking away that fear they have that I'm going to take up a lot of the guy's time or girl's time if they let me through. All right, so now once I do get through, let's say this worked and the owner was in, and they're actually going to transfer me over to talk to this decision maker or whoever the boss is, this is still a cold call. And just because I've been talking to the gatekeeper does not mean in any way that anybody else has any idea who I am. So I still need to treat this as a cold call. The next couple scripts we'll look at are what I use once I do get through to that decision maker to make sure I have a successful conversation with them and can keep that sales process moving forward. So my initial contact, basically the same as before. Introduce myself. Hey, good afternoon. This is Dave with Farmers Insurance. Is this a bad time? Now that first line there, that's critical. And I had a guy who was selling auto insurance out of a Subaru dealership. He told me that this line right here got him into more accounts than anything else had in the 5 years he'd been selling. And that is this a bad timeline? So critical because number one, I'm calling a busy person. I'm calling a business owner. And number two, because I'm a salesperson, the minute I identify myself as being Dave with Farmers Insurance, they know this is a sales call, and their instinct is to say no to whatever I say next, right? Doesn't matter how good my pitch is. And that's where a lot of us make mistakes, is we keep trying to refine our pitch. Well, they want to say no to whatever we bring up next. So I want to ask a question in the negative, and that way their automatic response to what they call mismatch with me, or say the opposite, actually is in favor of me. So when I ask, is this a bad time, that's what I'm most likely going to get a response of either, well, no, this works, or, yeah, you know what, it is a bad time, I'm in the middle of a meeting, or I'm in the middle of running out the door. Whatever objection I get to that, if I do get them saying, yeah, it is a bad time, I just want to say, oh, absolutely, I understand, and I know I'm calling out of the blue. When can I call you back? Again, I'm showing them I respect their time. I'm much more likely to get a good callback time if I do it that way. But like I said, more often than not, if they're just giving me whatever comes to their mind first, they're going to tell me, no, this works. What are you calling about? So fantastic. I'm calling because I work with individuals in the restaurant industry. I have some ideas I think might help you keep your insurance costs down while better protecting your revenue should something unexpected happen. It can also be terrible ideas, and you'll hate them. I just don't know. If it doesn't make sense, I'll get off the phone. Is that fair? So I love this line. So same thing I did kind of with the gatekeeper there. I'm not promising anything. I'm letting them know I have some ideas that I think might help, and I'm helping in two different ways here. I'm helping keep costs down. So if I've got a business owner who's cost sensitive, I'm going to help them keep costs down while at the same time better protecting revenue. So I'm hitting on the cost if they're worried about that, or I'm hitting on where the other place that hurts them, which is their pocketbook, because as we know, if something goes wrong and they don't have the right coverage, they don't have their backup of sewer and drain, or they don't have their power outage, or whatever it is that they most need, if that coverage isn't there, their revenue is going to be stopped and they're going to be in trouble. So they can also be terrible ideas and you'll hate them. This line is so critical because it stops me from trying to build myself up as the smartest one on the phone right now and the one who's got lots of great ideas, and I'm just going to verbal vomit them all over my prospect. When I say this piece, it takes down a lot of that sales defense, that barrier they have to being sold. When I let the prospect know that my ideas could be terrible and they won't like them, now all of a sudden I have a prospect who, instead of being resistant to hearing from me, is so much more likely to invite me to continue or laugh at that and say, they can't be that bad, tell me what you have. Okay, this is so critical. I play with this script a lot, and on a Friday a few months ago, I made 5 calls to 5 business owners, left voicemails using this script, and had all 5 voicemails returned by that Monday. I had 3 of them returned Friday afternoon, and the other 2 were returned by Monday. Okay? If it doesn't make sense, I'll get off the phone. I'm letting them know here that I'm not worried about my sale. I'm worried about helping them. Is that fair? I wait for permission. Keeps my prospect in control. Okay, so I'm not trying to lead this phone call. I'm letting my prospect stay in control at this point. And I move on. Okay, I just need to ask you a few specifics about your current situation. And then I move on to my interview. Now, I don't always get the person, right? Sometimes that gatekeeper just puts us through to a voicemail. There's a lot of debate in sales as to whether or not to leave a voicemail. And again, I'll be sending you this script out, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time of it just for the sake of time on our call today. But same exact idea here. Introduce myself, let them know I have some ideas, and they could be helpful or terrible. And the last piece there, it takes about 2 minutes to find out. You can give me a call back at. So the 2 minutes piece, that lets them know, again, not a big time commitment on their end. And I'm not giving them, I'm not doing a lot of please call me back and I'd really appreciate a call back. All that sales junk that, again, just makes my skin crawl, and the same thing happens to your prospects. I'm a professional. I've got ideas that could help this person. It takes 2 minutes to find out if what I have to say is worth hearing. They can give me a call back at. I leave my phone number, say, thanks, Greg. Talk to you soon. Okay? That's all I'm going to do on that voicemail. That's a cold voicemail. There's another type of voicemail that I really like to use. Once I had a few clients in a certain industry, I would leverage those. And this is something that my sales coach taught me when I was brand new and I was starting to get some traction and really see things pick up. What he said to me was that name dropping at a dinner party is not socially acceptable. Name dropping when we're in business is huge, especially in sales. Okay? I want to drop the name of any other competitor, any other big name that I have in the industry. That's actually going to do a lot to build my credibility up. Now remember, this is basically a cold call to this person. This was made off by my marketer, or it's me following up. and this person does not know me from anybody else, I have zero credibility, so I've got to build some here, and this is one way I can do that. So, good afternoon, decision maker's name. Again, this is Dave with Farmers Insurance. I was calling because I recently helped Subway, McDonald's, and McGrath's to better protect themselves from disruption to revenue in case of an emergency, as well as lowering their overall liability costs. Based on your business, I thought these same ideas might work for you as well, but I won't know until we have a chance to talk for about 2 minutes. I can be reached at. Okay, very powerful. I loved this script. The minute I wrote one restaurant in a town, or I got one plumber, or I got one, whoever it was, the minute I got in a commercial account, auto body shop, I would call everybody else in that industry. I'd drop the name of their competitor and say, I have no idea if what worked for them would be as effective for them as it would be for you. I don't know. If you want to talk, let me know, and I'll give you 5 minutes of my time. We can find out. I was always invited in to do a quote at that point. And pretty soon, I'm writing policies all over town. So business owners never want the competition to have a leg up on them in any way. So leverage that. If you have one account in an industry, then drop that name when you're calling other people. I even have my guy who does business-to-business cold calling. He calls nationwide, so there's not a lot of name recognition with his smaller accounts. He drops their name anyway. He does it in a way that makes it sound like you should know who this person is. They're important. And again, it builds his credibility even though he's making cold calls. So those are our voicemails. And again, I don't leave a voicemail with everybody, but I do leave voicemails with those accounts that I think I'd really like to get a hold of. All right, interviews. So if everything goes well, I'm having a conversation. Now I get in to interview my prospect. We're going to start moving faster and faster through material at this point, because the hard part is really just getting our foot in the door in a positive way. Once somebody trusts me to sit down and do an interview, the biggest mistake I can make in sales is go in with a pre-scripted interview, just a list of real boring questions about square footage or revenue for the last year, or whatever junk you're supposed to print off. Farmers Insurance gave me, God, it must have been 16 or 17 pages of interview questions I was supposed to ask a commercial prospect. And I'll tell you, even when I sat down with a guy who owned 18 McDonald's restaurants in my town, I did not do an extensive interview, at least not right off the bat, because that's not what's going to make the buying decision on his end. He's going to buy based on whether he trusts me to protect his business and give him a fair price. So that's what my interview needs to convey. So for the interview, the way I structure my interviews with any kind of commercial client is I start out with some very, very basic, softball, easy to answer questions. How long have you been in business for? How many restaurants do you have? I like to stick with restaurants. Those are some of my favorites. How many different locations do you have? How many employees do you have? Perfect. So I ask 3-4 questions like that. I want to take less than a minute to ask those questions, just some real easy ones, just so we can start having some kind of a conversation. And then I want to start moving into more of the personal side, more of what makes this guy tick. So one of my favorites is always, why did you get into this business? What made you want to open your first McDonald's franchise? What inspired you to do that? And that's going to get this individual really opening up to me. Now I'm going to start to see under the hood a little bit as to what makes them tick. That's where I'm going to learn that it had always been their dream to do this, or they'd failed at other things, and finally they had an opportunity to do McDonald's. And if any of you know what it takes, it's quite a process to get into that franchise, and it's just fascinating to me to learn how that works. So by doing an interview in that way and starting to ask more of these questions, I really am tapping into emotionally why this person owns a business. And that's what I'm going to leverage when I go to sell. So really important to interview in such a way that I learn about the person, not just the nuts and bolts of their business. Also, this is going to set me apart, again, from every other salesperson who's ever come through who just asks the standard underwriting questions to try and get a quote out there. Okay? If I sound like everybody else, then the only way they're going to have to make a decision is, does my price look like everyone else's price, or is it better? And I don't want to be competing on price. I want to have something besides the price to get me that business. So by asking those kind of questions, now I start learning a lot about them, and I ask follow-up questions based on that. Okay, so you bought this franchise because you had always wanted to be your own business owner. How has business been going? Well, it's been great. Business has been growing over the years. And then I say, perfect. What's your biggest concern? Knowing all this, what worries you? What keeps you up at night in terms of your business? And again, these are the things I'm going to use when I come back with my quote. I'm going to come back with numbers and coverages, and especially if I'm more expensive, I can now say to my prospect, listen, prospect, I am more expensive, but when we sat down, you told me your biggest fear was that somebody would be injured in your establishment and you wouldn't have the right coverage for it. Looking at your current policy, I think there's a gap there, and I've taken care of that in the quote that I've put out for you here. Okay, that business that I mentioned early on where I actually was physically escorted out of the business, I came back 5 months later with this approach, interviewed the owner, landed the account, and I did it because I added a coverage in there that I'd learned about was really, really important to her, and that her current policy I didn't think really addressed as well as I could. So by asking those questions that nobody else asks, I can now position my quote to land and to get me into an account in a way that otherwise I would just be stuck competing on price. So you can reach out to me after the webinar if you want to talk more about that, but the biggest thing I can tell you on your interview is don't give a canned interview with underwriting questions. A couple of those are okay, and the way I would get all those questions answered are, number one, their existing policy, and number two, if I finished my interview and I still hadn't asked all those underwriting questions, but I had done a really good job building rapport, it was very easy for me to say to the prospect, listen, love talking to you today. I got plenty here to get this quote started, but you know what? My underwriter, they're probably going to have a lot more questions for me moving forward. Is it okay if I give you a call back as those things come up? I won't bug you all the time, but maybe another half hour on the phone or something just to ask some real specifics about the business and all that. They were always happy to have that second phone call. Okay, I'd much rather put that off till later and spend my first interview building rapport because, again, that's where the sale is going to be made. All right, so after my interview, quote presentation. Okay, so I've done my interview. I've got the quote started. I probably already know a whole list of questions I didn't get around to asking that I'm going to be calling the person back for. So I call back. I did all those, put it through to underwriting, and the underwriter generally has additional things that they want clarification on or they want some more information on. I get all that done. Okay, and I've called the prospect back, and each time I call, we have that rapport, right? So I'm having a good conversation with them. Now it's time to present my quote. Now this quote presentation, I'm going to get you guys a copy of this. This is one that I got from a guy. His name is Mike Nielsen. He's in Portland, Oregon, and he's a farmer's agent. He does $2 million a year in commercial. That's his pay. He's the top producing commercial agent in the company. And what he does, his quote presentation is 5 pages long for a commercial account. The quote presentation that would print off from the computer, if I just hit print quote, was again, I think, over 17 pages long. It was just this book, and it had all these coverages in it that I really had no interest in talking about, that my client had no interest in talking about, and would oftentimes do more harm than good in the sale. So what Mike did, and what I started doing, was taking my very own, just a basic Word document. I'd print off the big fat quote that the computer would print for me, and I would pull out specific things in it that I really wanted to talk about with my prospect. So you can see here, this is my coverage page. There's a number of pages there, but I like to do a coverage comparison. So what I go through and I think about during my interview, what were the most important things for that client? What did they really want to make sure was in that insurance? Or where do I see really big gaps in their current coverage that I can come in and fill, that I can highlight using this page? And you can see it's no mistake that on the page you're looking at here on your screen, that now carries column, that's what they currently have as their coverage. And then my recommendations, the now carries looks almost blank compared to what I'm recommending there. Okay, so I want to make sure that I have either really big numbers on my recommendation side or that I have a lot more coverages than they currently have. Not usually that hard to do if you're giving a really comprehensive quote here. And again, this makes justification for a higher price a lot easier. When somebody says to me, gosh, Dave, this thing costs a ton more, I say, but look, I've got backup of sewer and drain on your policy. You don't have that right now. Okay? If something happens, you have the dishwasher line break, or something else goes wrong and you're shut down for 3 days, a high-end restaurant can lose $30,000 for being shut down for just to mop up that mess and clean everything up. I've got you covered for that. Okay, so I can talk about all this. I can really structure this quote. And the way I would present this thing is I would give them the 5-page quote. I would lay it right on top of the nice, thick 20, 30-page, whatever giant quote my company wanted me to have. And I'd say, listen, what I've done here is I've got a quote summary for you. I went through, based on our conversation, I pulled out the coverages that you and I had talked about, the coverages that I really feel like are going to be essential for you moving forward. I've highlighted those in this quote presentation. I'd like to look it over with you real quick just to make sure you don't have any questions on it. And if you do want to dig into the nitty-gritty and look at all the fine print and everything else, I have the full quote sitting right here underneath, and feel free to go into that later. And I'll tell you, I never had one prospect actually look at the big quote. They were so thankful to have just a nice summary that we could look at very quickly together, and that they could then give me a quick yes or no as to whether or not they wanted to move forward. And again, this was just a simple Word document. It's not fancy. It's intentionally not fancy, because I just want to be able to quickly run through this with my person, and then we're off to the races as to whether or not we're working together. Okay, I think that's about it for material. So if any of you on here, if we have any questions, now would be a great time. I'm happy to go live and talk about questions. Or if you want more, if any of you enjoyed this and there was stuff that you feel like you wanted more in-depth stuff on, you can absolutely reach out to me. davidschwendiman.com is my website. I've got a blog on there. I do short little video blogs, maybe 4 minutes long, with written content. All I write about is sales, and there's a couple hundred of them on there at this point. So you can go to my blog. You can read all you want on there. You email me. And those of you that are looking for something more interactive, that effortless selling website, while my one-on-one coaching practice is pretty full at this point, the results have been great. I'm just working off referrals right now. I am putting together a group coaching. We're limiting it just to 10 people, but if there's anybody out there who's interested in that, and it's a 3-month course just focused on everything it takes to really grow your business, and allowing a larger number of people to take advantage than I can just handle with my one-on-one. And my partner, Steve Johnson, and I are running that one. So if anyone's interested in any of those, or you have other questions that you don't have time to put in there, you can reach out to me. So Dwight, I think I heard you hop back on.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, David. I really appreciate it. Good stuff. So, you know, we have quite a few questions. Probably only be able to get to a couple of them. Okay. Because we really, you know, we said the duration of the webinar was going to be 30 minutes, but we have so much great stuff to cover.
I like talking. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. It's perfect. So one question is, you know, in this digital world, have you seen more people reluctant to talk on the phone? And if so, do you try to keep it on the phone, or do you bring the communication back to an email, and what works best?
Right. So I don't like email. If I can help it, I don't. And I'm old school, I guess, in this way. If I'm going to connect with someone and I'm going to make a sale, as digital as we've gotten, and if you look at social media and all that, the reason it's so popular is we feel so disconnected these days from everybody. And again, my competition is emailing. My competition is emailing proposals. My competition is emailing quotes and trying to market via email. And to stand out in that noise is really hard. And so I much prefer that face-to-face. Like I said, my walk-ins were the most effective way I could sell commercial. It just wasn't efficient in terms of how many I could fit in a day. So my next choice was phone. And if somebody asked for an email, let's say they wanted me to email them a proposal or something like that. I just did it this morning, actually. I had a prospect asking for a proposal to be emailed. What I do is I say, I'm happy to email you that, but I want to make sure there's nothing in there that's confusing. The language can sometimes be off. And there's a few points in here that I'd like to highlight. I'll email it, but can we hop on a phone and talk about it? And then once I get that phone appointment, I wait to email until 5 minutes before the phone appointment, email it off to them when I know they're going to talk to me on the phone, and that's the best way I found to get that through. Because if I just email it off blind, your prospect's going to look for the number at the bottom, decide if they like the number, and if they do, you have a shot. If they don't, you're out of the running, even without having a chance to plead your case to them. So I hope that answers the question, but phone or face-to-face are my absolute go-tos.
Right on. So what do you have a time of the day that that those calls work the best?
Yeah, my favorite time is 2 to 4:30 p.m. was when my marketer would call for me. What I found was early in the morning, business owners are in, they're trying to get set for the day, they're making their phone calls, they don't want to be receiving them. But after lunch, so they go to lunch, they come back, they get back in. So if you're an auto mechanic, if you own a restaurant, anybody that I know of through lunch is generally the most productive part of their day in terms of them getting business. But between that 2 to 4:30 window, things are starting to wind down. I'm much more likely to get through and have a conversation with somebody.
Right on. Now, do you have like any pre-approach, pre-approach techniques before you meet with the client? During the 60-second calls when you first get in, talking
sorry,
about.
Can you say it again? It sounds like I'm lost you for a bit there.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you have any like pre-approach techniques before meeting the prospect? Hello? David? All right, I think we might be having some technical difficulties. We have a ton of questions still coming in. Go ahead and continue asking.
Sorry, can you still hear me?
Yeah, can you, I lost you just for a sec. David? Hello?
All right, I'm going to hang up real quick and call back in on the line, see if we can't get it.
You know what, that's okay. I think I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar. And we can get to some of these questions too. They're great questions. Really appreciate your time, David. If you can still hear me, I will get with you and get these questions answered, maybe get the agents on the call, but have a lot of great material. So
Dwight,
again, thank you for presenting. Yes, can you hear me?
So yeah, sorry, I had to dial back in. We have time to answer that last question?
Yeah, okay, so the question was, do you have any pre-approach techniques?
Right. So I love this. This is one I didn't include here because it's a little bit in depth. I'll just give an overview. And again, if anyone wants copies of my material, please, they're welcome to anything I have. Something I used was handwritten letters. So once I had a phone call with somebody, or once my marketer got me an in, and maybe I'd had one phone call and scheduled an X date, so I know their renewal is coming up in 3 or 4 months. What I would do is I typed up a letter to this individual, just real brief, just reintroducing myself. You remember we talked on the phone, it's David Schwendiman, and then I would hand this off to my CSR. And she was an English major, so she had beautiful handwriting, and she would handwrite my typed letter. She would handwrite the letter for me, hand address the envelope, and then I would just sign the thing, and we'd send it off. And then 3 days later, so if I sent the letter on a Monday, I'm calling back on Wednesday or Thursday. I had such a warm welcome. These accounts, again, making it more personal, they'd never experienced that before. Everybody is sending form letters, or like we talked about, the emails. I was the only salesperson ever to send them a handwritten letter, and I usually wouldn't get past just saying my first name on the phone before I would get, oh my gosh, David, I got your letter. How do you find the time to write all these? And my response was always, listen, I only write them to the people I really want to do business with, should we keep talking. And it was such a warm opening. And the time on my side was literally, I had a form letter that I typed up, and my CSR knew to plug in the name, plug in a few details I'd have down there, that I wanted her to include in the letter to help them reference me. And then I signed the thing. And we had matching pens that we would use. So even the pens looked the same, from the handwriting to my signature. And I'd write them. I'd have her write them weeks ahead of time. And I'd file them away in my Tickler file. And when that file came up, I would just take the letter, put a stamp on it, drop it in the mail, and I was done. And then my Google Calendar would remind me to give them a call 3 days later. And it was such an effective way for me to get into these accounts.
It is very strange to get a handwritten note. And I guess that answers one of the next questions. How do you like email campaigns?
I just don't use them. I feel like they're deleted. Either they go right to the spam or the person reads it, and in my opinion, it does more harm than good. I would much rather spend a little more time on one prospect and increase my chances of landing that lead than just do the blanket approach and hope that I somehow resonate with somebody basically shooting blind. And that was my approach. And if anybody on the call, if you're doing personal lines and you've got the ability to write financial services, life insurance, all that, I cross-sold all of my commercial prospects, everything else that they had, because the relationship was so much stronger. So I didn't just leave, I wasn't leaving money on the table, and my approach allowed me to really penetrate those accounts and get in a lot further than I would have been able to otherwise.
Right on. Well, David, again, I really appreciate your time. We are way over, but everybody is staying on the call, and I think that's just a testament to how great the material was. So I really appreciate your time, and I look forward to getting with you to answer some of these questions.
Sounds good. And I'll get you the email for the materials, and we'll send it out to everybody. Make sure they can keep this momentum going in their agency.
Sounds good. Thanks, everybody, for attending.
All right, Dwight. We'll see you later. See you, everybody.
Okay.